ask you about the war in Ukraine. There were talks in Turkey this week between Russia and Ukraine, but none of the principals were there. President Zelensky wasn't there. President Putin wasn't there. President Trump wasn't there. President Trump said the only way to get a deal is for him to meet with Putin face to face. Knowing what you know about Vladimir Putin, Mr. Vice President, do you think he will ever be serious about making a deal?
It's been roughly 3 years since Russia launched its unprovoked, brutal invasion into Ukraine. Hundreds of thousands of lives have been lost. At the outset of the war, I actually traveled with my wife across the border to a refugee center. Saw hundreds and hundreds of women and children of every age fleeing from the Russian invasion. I would return there a year or so back and meet with President Zelensky and hear again about the horrors and depredations of the Russian military. Look, I've met Vladimir Putin. My judgment is Vladimir Putin only understands strength. And, President Zelensky has agreed to a ceasefire, a 30-day ceasefire that our European allies called for. And Vladimir Putin calls a meeting that he doesn't show up for. So I honestly think the time has come for President Trump to impose harsh sanctions on Russia and also to increase military support for Ukraine. I think those two messages, making it clear, in combination with the president's good recent dialogue with President Zelensky that took place at the Vatican, and in addition to the new mineral deal, which I think sent a deafening message to Moscow that America and Ukraine are here to stay, I think the time is now for sanctions against Russia, additional sanctions against Russia, Kristen, and also renewed military support for Ukraine. I think that and only that has the potential to bring Vladimir Putin to the table and achieve a just and lasting peace.
Last month, President Trump directed the Attorney General to review 2 people he considers to be political foes, including Chris Krebs, who's the election official who called the 2020 election the most secure in American history. Do you ever worry that President Trump will order an investigation into you for your actions on January 6th?
I don't worry about it. I regret some of the rear-view thinking this administration's been doing. I mean, for people that did their job, some of the cancellation of security details around people like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and John Bolton, I think have been regrettable. But, elections are about the future. And I think the American people elected President Trump to return to the White House to focus on the future. And if I had a word with him, I'd encourage him to keep eyes forward and embrace the better angels of his nature in all these issues.
You were recently awarded the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award for your actions on January 6th. President Trump pardoned nearly 1,600 people who were criminally charged in connection with their actions on January 6th. You said that pardoning people who assaulted law enforcement, quote, sent the wrong message. What message did those pardons send, sir?
Well, first, let me say I was deeply humbled by the recognition that we received from the John F. Kennedy Library. President Kennedy was a hero from my youth, still is, and to be in any way associated with his legacy and Americans that he wrote about in his famous book was one of the greatest honors of my life, and I'm truly grateful. But look, I will always believe by God's grace I did my duty that day to support and defend the Constitution of the United States and see to the peaceful transfer of power. But individuals who broke into the Capitol, who assaulted police officers, I said that day, and I believe to this moment, should have been prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Now, I will say, Kristen, I know there were people that came into the Capitol that day that just walked through an open door. Meant no harm, did no harm. Those people, every single one of them, if they were caught up in the legal system, they should have been pardoned. But the people that engaged in violence We're at the end here of Police Week in Washington, D.C. That's where the families of fallen officers come to our nation's capital every year to remember those who died in the line of duty. The heroes on January 6th were all wearing uniforms. They held the line. They made it possible for us to secure the Capitol, reconvene the Congress, and complete our work under the Constitution on the very same day. And for my part, I will always believe to have pardoned people that assaulted police officers that day was wrong.